the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Good morning, everybody. I like to do different. Welcome to this week's edition of the Countryside Podcast. I've stolen away from the farm just for a couple of hours and driven due southwards to the seaside. And to explain where I am, I'm right on the east coast, very close to the most easterly point of the UK, which is Ness Point, which is only a mile or so away from me, to my right. And if I step down onto the shingle bank on the beach, there we are, I can look northwards and I can see in the way distance Sizewell nuclear plant down there about 3 miles away from me. And just this side of that, I can see fishing boats just coming in, landing the morning catch. A whole trail of gulls following them as the fishermen dress out the fish ready to be landed on the shore. 2-3 people actually out swimming in the sea, although it's only 7 o'clock in the morning, would you believe? It's the madness that hits you when you hit the coast at this time of the year. And as I look a little bit further south, quite close to me now, is the small town of Aldeburgh, right on the Suffolk coast. It's quite an ancient town with a long fishing history. And I'm just walking down the shingle bank now, just to prove that I'm at the sea. I've stolen away with Rat, and I'll explain why I've come here. Hello, Rat. He's already down. He's very interested in these waves, which are because of the high pressure and the fine weather that we have at the moment. We're into May, by the way. The sea is kind of mill pond flat this morning. The sun's still shining. It's unseasonably warm. But just listen to this. It's a shingle beach. And it's a really therapeutic sound. Just as the small waves just lap onto the shingle. Let's have a moment of this. The water is crystal clear and I can see almost to 2 meters deep. The shingle slopes away quite rapidly, and the shingle bank's been built up partly mechanically and partly by the action of the tides here to form a kind of sea barrier. And I'm going to walk back up the shingle bank now, leave the sea behind me, but it's just such a wonderful sound. Here we go. It's quite a steep climb back up, and now I'll be able to explain why I've done this trip. Oh, 2 swallows in front of me, scooching along the shingle bank, just very close to the ground, just looking for insects. The ancient town of Aldeburgh on my right, and as I start to climb, the swallows have almost brushed me. And we have one of my Suffolk correspondents to thank for this morning. Michael Fairburn has told me that some special birds have arrived here, and it's what I love to do, to celebrate the early arrivals and what's happening at this time of the year. The swallows are darting round me. Whew, that was a steep climb. Just come to the top of the bank now, and there's a small road, and I'm crossing the small road. Morning. Then in front of me, leaving the sea behind, a fantastic sight of marshland, reed beds. I've already heard my first cuckoo, first one of the year here at Aldeburgh, and down the steep bank the other side Oh, mute swan flying towards me, about 200 yards away. A huge area of marshland as far as the eye can see. Absolutely stunning. Some blackhead gulls. Oh, and the mute swan's just landed, feet down, and skied onto one of the dikes right in front of me. On my left is the tributary of the River Alde, where it joins the North Sea. Hence Aldeburgh, the town on the River Alde. And few swallows swooching round. Very steep bank. Again, the sea defence runs inland to protect the old town here, which is in front of me. But lots of dikes in front of me. It's barely above sea level down here, which is why it's protected by this sort of walkway I'm walking on, quite elevated, about 15 feet to the top with a flat top. And lots of Alexanders beside me in flower, and that's a very distinctive smell from my childhood. Used to roll about in that plant with my sisters, and it's sort of quite an aromatic smell, and it's covered in black flies. And this will help us a lot this morning. They're called St George's Day flies, and at this time of the year they scare people a bit. They've got quite a large ovipositor hanging down beneath them, which looks as though it might be a sting. But I can promise you they don't sting. But that's fodder for what I've come down here to see, and I'm still talking and scanning across, because just waiting to see the first one. As Michael Fairbairn has told me, the swifts have arrived at Aldeburgh. And it's a bird which I know well at High Ash Farm. Just such a wonderful sight. A cattle egret flying out to one of the dikes across to another one. Bright white, a sort of a heron that's been dipped in white paint. Quite common down on these marshes. Some butterflies, large whites flying, and some small whites as well mixed in. That's the first large white I've seen scooching along the bank here. So, swifts. So I'm now looking northwards over the old town of Aldeburgh with a stretch of marshland between me and the town itself. Oh, wonderful view. Herring gull going over the top, and we're now being followed by some more early morning walkers. Here they go past. Morning. Hello. There. So, swifts. I'll tell you a bit about them while we're still looking. Best way to describe a swift, which you generally only see on the wing, they arrive usually about middle of May, but this year, as with the swallows at High Ash Farm, a little bit earlier. So we're into May, so now's the swift time. And it's a sort of sickle-shaped bird. Very long, thin wings, which give them the forward propulsion. Very long primary feathers, and the wings are quite narrow. Sickle shape, and somebody best described it as the bow escaped with the arrow and it's flying. So you have a tiny little point out the front, almost jet black plumage, dusky, sort of greyish in places. The only white patch on a swift is just under the chin, and that's the bit that swells up when they're feeding on insects, quite a distance from where they might be nesting. Other than that, they eat the food themselves and they form a kind of little bolus. Scientific name is Apus apus. It means footless, because swifts were thought to have no feet. The most aerial bird in the world. So when a young swift, for example, leaves its nest, it might fly for 2 or 3 years before it touches anything solid. It's really hard to get your head round. So a swift of, say, 5-6 years old will have flown well over 1 million miles, probably 1.5 million miles. And some of the longest lived swifts, which get to perhaps 20 years old, will have covered a staggering 3.5 to 4 million miles. And if your car gets to 100,000 miles, it's done pretty well. So swifts are truly amazing. They'll come to Aldeburgh, and this is why I'm here, because Aldeburgh celebrates its swifts. And 2 years ago, when I last visited, there was a big sign up outside the town saying Aldeburgh is welcoming the swifts. And they go to special measures here to help them, because a lot of the old roofs have been sealed so the swifts can't nest under the tiles. That's the only time they really come to ground to nest, obviously. They sleep on the wing, they mate on the wing, they drink on the wing, and they feed on the wing. Sort of aerial plankton, like the swallows, like the house martins, sand martins as well. But they're not related to those other three species, which surprises everybody. They're more closely related, wait for it, to hummingbirds, part of their history. So, lot of information that we've learnt in recent decades about swifts, that they'll migrate up from the sort of Central African region, sort of around the Congo. They'll spend our winter down there, bearing in mind that we don't have the flying insects during the summer months. Up in the UK, it goes very quiet, so they leave, and they're about one of the last migrants to arrive, and surprisingly, 16 weeks, mid-August, they generally have departed. So they've only time to bring off this one nest attempt. Little roundish white eggs, usually under roof tiles if they're available. And here at Aldeburgh, on many of the older buildings, this is why Aldeburgh's special. They've put up lots and lots of nest boxes, so congratulations. Swifts fly into the little hole from underneath, and when they leave the nest, they just drop down and start flying. Sometimes young swifts get grounded. When they leave the nest, they get a bit stunned on the ground, and they sometimes need a help to loft them back, but quite often they'll take off by themselves, and adults can take off without help, although the wings need to go beneath the body angle to get the lift off, because the wings are designed in such a way that they get lots of forward thrust. It's one of the fastest level flying birds in the world, sort of 50-60 miles an hour flying in the straight, whereas obviously birds like peregrines, when they stoop, can double that speed. But on level flight, the swift is the king, really, for such a small bird. Weighs about the same size as a sort of cream egg, to give you an idea, about 40 grams, so quite small birds, but quite a bit heavier than a swallow. The swift is one of my favourites. It really kind of symbolises summer. In fact, it's here really just for our short season of summer. What have we got? Oh, skylark flying in front of us. Still no sign of swift, although I know they're here. Looking across the marshes, you can scan right across the top of the houses, about a quarter of a mile away. And normally, when you have one swift, there'll be several here. And they kind of form these screaming parties, which sounds pretty horrific. You often hear them, particularly close to my home, in the centre of Norwich, and round about the old houses. They'll form what are called screaming parties. And it's a high-pitched, the only way to describe it is a scream, really. And when you slow it down, which I have done with various bird sounds over the years, firstly it kind of sounds like some sort of waterfowl croaking, and then after that, when you slow it down even more, perhaps 10 to 1, slow it down, it's an astonishing sound that almost sounds whale-like, very different to what you'd expect. And because they live life in a fast lane, I'm sure the swifts flying along with them can understand what all this means. A long-lived bird, a bird that clocks up a huge amount of mileage, and I still haven't seen one. So I've covered about a quarter of a mile, and just looking across at the sky, it's perfect blue sky. There's hardly a breath of air, and it's superb sort of feeding time for the swifts as all these black flies St George's Day flies come off the Alexanders and form this aerial plankton, which I'm sure over the next few days, as other swifts arrive, they'll be feasting on. So the swift, large, sort of blunt at the front, and for the most aerial bird in the world that spends all its time on the wing, a sort of torpedo shape, but that's in perfect symmetry of what the swift's life is. Those eddies which a lot of birds have to suffer from, you get what's called drag. When you have a torpedo shape, the bird kind of slips through the air with the least resistance. The beak is tiny, but then something extraordinary happens. When they're trawling the air for these black flies, the beak opens up into a huge gape, and they kind of fly along like a whale with its mouth wide open, and just trawl up the insects. So that's why I call it kind of aerial plankton. It sort of symbolises what whales do in a funny way. So I'm getting quite close to that herd of cattle now, and I'm just looking over the top of them. This is excellent habitat for the swifts, so I'm just going to sit down for a minute and just watch what happens. Oh, herring gull going right over the top of me. And I've been rewarded already. The cattle have done the trick. Must be stirring up lots of flying insects, and I haven't seen a swift. 25 swifts feeding communally over the top of me, about 200 feet up. I'm going to just have to, excuse me, lay on my back because it's the only way you can see them properly. Here we go. Blue sky. Dark, sickle-like birds just hardly flicking their wings and moving around a couple of 100 feet at least up above, just hoovering up the aerial plankton. And that's what they do. They love feeding together. They also like nesting quite close together as well, a bit like my house sparrows back at the farm. And there's some amazing footage. I think it's taken by Marconi Limited. They were down on the south coast with the radar, and it was pointing northwards towards London, and they got a wonderful kind of blip, which some birds cause on radar when you have enough of them, and it recorded swifts flying up in the early evening from North London, and the swifts sort of came up almost simultaneously, lots of them together, enough to cause quite a large blip on the radar, and they flew due north and fed overnight about 120 miles north of North London over the Wash, where there was a high and a low, a sort of front that mixed up the insects and took them up quite high. The swifts fed at about close to 3,000 metres up, which is 10,000 feet, and then at dawn they just all returned, and that sort of starts to reveal the marvels of this particular bird, which has always fascinated me. And even the chicks in the nest, because they've come to our country for between 12 and 16 weeks to do one nesting attempt. And even the young are quite amazing, because you know in the UK it's lovely and sunny and warm here at the moment. It's up to about 23 Celsius today already. The chicks, obviously, if the weather is really poor and you have one of these cold fronts coming over, there's no flying insects. So the adult swifts, the parents, fly around the back of the front, if that makes sense, and probably go over to northern France while the weather's bad, and then they return. Normally, most birds, the chicks would all be dead, but swift chicks, trick number one, they can go into something called torpor. Their nest is hardly a nest at all, nothing to keep them warm. Their respiration goes right down, really low, and their metabolism as well, and they're able to survive a couple of days without being fed by the parents. Truly amazing. And once they start to get a decent size about 8 to 10 days before they actually fledge and leave the nest. They actually do press-ups, not with their arms because they haven't got any, but with their wings to kind of strengthen them, because the moment they leave that nest box or wherever the nest is, they've got to fly from the word go. But there we are. I'm being absolutely spoilt. Just stunning for me. And the sight above me, they're still whirring round. Just this black sickle shape in the sky above me. Lots of them. How they don't crash into each other, I don't know. But they've arrived en masse at Aldeburgh.
One of those very fine mornings here on High Ash Farm, and I've loved listening to Chris's trip to the seaside and to the swifts. Aren't they amazing creatures? But here we are. It feels like July actually, with the sun and the warmth and the blue skies, but through in the woods there, Chris, we can still see bluebells.
Yes, on large parts of the farm the bluebells have been and gone. The crabapple tree, the magnificent spectacle that made 2 podcasts ago, I think, that's finished flowering. And on last week's podcast we visited the wild cherry, or geen as it's called, and that's finished flowering as well. Rat has decided to find a basking grass snake.
This happened when we were here last time.
Yes, the snake population at the farm has increased hugely. We've done a lot of newly planted hedges, and in the bottom of the hedge there's about a metre wide of black plastic, and the whips, as we call them, the baby hawthorn and blackthorn plants are planted through the plastic to stop it drying out and to save spraying the base of the hedge. And the snakes love it. They can go underneath and get warmed up. Slow worm populations increased as well. So Rat has a marked disdain of grass snakes, and he's not going near it. So he's just standing there, barking at it. My demented terrier, but he knows his business. He knows what to sort of chase and what not to chase. Look at that, amazing. He's stock still. And Matthew, we've got a busy morning. I'm just back from that trip to the coast, my flash visit to Aldeburgh, and so I knew you were coming later this morning, so I've made sure I got back in good time, and it's still early morning. So we've got some white flowers to visit. First of all, we're in the edge of, or on the edge of High Ash Farm. Is Hallback Lane in front of us, which is also Boudicca's Way, goes right through the northern part of the farm. We've got being serenaded by a blackcap, another one of those warbler arrivals.
Boudicca's Way is just room for a chariot there, isn't there?
Just about, yes. So I'll sort of saddle up some horses and we can take a ride through after the podcast. Right, just take a few careful steps through here.
Through we go, avoiding the grass snakes. And we're onto the pathway now. Yes. And some bluebells just finishing there.
Yeah, just about finished, and the early purple orchids, we might go and visit those next week. Right. I'll pick him up. And they're just about finished, but as one species finishes flowering, then the next comes in, so you kind of have this succession through the countryside, particularly this time of the year. Now we're in May. That blackcap's determined to be on this week's podcast. Lovely, lovely sound. Right, here's our first one, and it's a crucifer. So it's a member of the cabbage family, and it's quite tall because we're in the shade. There's adequate moisture. It's heavy clay soil where we're standing on, and it's called... It's got lots of names, actually. Sort of garlic mustard, I suppose, is its commonest name. And I'll explain why. I'm just going to take a leaf off the top of the plant, like this, and I'm going to hand it to you and have a little nibble on it, and I'll do the same. Just to prove I haven't given you anything poisonous. And you kind of bite in.
Yeah.
After a few seconds...
Oh, yeah, garlic.
Garlic.
Yeah.
Garlic mustard. So, tiny little blue flowers at the top, 4 petals, and that's the secret. That's why it's a member of that family, crucifer.
A cross.
Yes, the cross. And other members are kale, cabbages, which you might grow in your garden. There's quite a few of them. And the reason it's kind of important like this is because it's got this really strong garlic taste. I'm really getting it now. You can use it in salads. People still gather the top leaves before they get too strong. If I gave you one of those larger leaves further down the plant, that would make your toes curl up.
I do like garlic, though, I must say.
Yes, as I said, it's a modern addition to salads. Some of these old plants are coming well back into fashion, but it's attractive not just to us, but to a particular species of butterfly, and that's called the orange tip. It's food plant. So at this time of the year, we're a little bit early in the morning. This area that's in the sunshine now will be patrolled by diminutive little white butterflies. The females are more or less pure white, and the males have a very distinctive orange tip on the wing, hence orange tip butterflies. And they lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves, little spherical eggs, and they then hatch out.
There are many bird species on High Ash Farm, and Chris Skinner, that's one of them, isn't it?
Yes, very diminutive. Matthew, we're being serenaded by a wren.
Just one of the great delights of visiting the farm, but we need your assistance.
Yes, to keep us in fine voice, we need a few donations.
Any surplus funds to go towards the wonderful conservation work, to make a small one-off payment or a monthly donation. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Believe me, it's just a pure delight.
And that includes Jenny Wren.
Very fine voice. And this is why the plant's important. The caterpillars, once they're hatched out, the second stage of the metamorphosis to the orange-tip butterfly, they hatch out and munch away at these leaves. So I know when an orange tip has been here because the leaves get serrated. They sort of ingest all of that, including the garlic, and somehow or other they're kind of bird-proof. The birds perhaps don't like the taste, so they tend to avoid them. So there we are, garlic, mustard. So you've got a combination of something quite hot when you chew the leaf and garlic taste as well.
You see, butterflies' garlic breath.
Yeah.
It's doing the trick for them, helping them to survive.
Yes,
That's and a very nice taste. I'll have to bear that in mind for future salads.
Okay, well, just be careful because we're going to cross a little ditch, only about 15 or 20 feet.
Here we go. Towards these still beautiful bluebells. Up we come.
And here's our second.
There's more white flowers here, sort of in the dappled sunshine.
Yes, and that's exactly what it likes. Right, this has still got the garlic name, is wild garlic. Ramsons. A lot of people pronounce it as Ransoms, which is a company not far away at Ipswich that lawnmowers and ploughs. I've spent 30 years pulling Ransoms ploughs of various sizes and furrow numbers behind me. So Ramsons.
With an M.
An M, correct. Or wild garlic, and it's an aroma. It's a species of lily, as is the other side of the fence here, the bluebells. So they're members of the lily family.
And there's a lot of it as well.
Oh, there's thousands of them. They go right up through there, and part of it's in dappled sunlight and really attractive. But sometimes, particularly in the west of the country where the rain falls higher, down in Cornwall as well, in the deep-sided little lanes, you get whole profusions of it. And if it sort of invades onto a footpath and you're walking along, then you're pretty certain the person you're walking with has been eating garlic. And if you've got flip-flop shoes on the actual scent goes through the sole of the shoe and goes into your feet, and you actually end up smelling of garlic. Amazing. So let's just have a little look. We'll just look at the leaves down here. There's lots of flowers to come out, but they're beautiful little star-like flowers. Just look here, there's 6 petals on this particular one, and you get a whole rosette of them. And if I just put my hand down like this onto the woodland floor, and then just have a scent of that.
Oh yeah,
it is really powerful.
Pungent, that isn't it?
That's a good word. Pungent is a description of it. So you can, although you mustn't do it, you mustn't dig up wildflowers. It has a bulb at the bottom which you can use as garlic, but people gather the leaves. Deer love to eat it. You can see this leaf has been nibbled out. So the local deer will have breath smelling of garlic. It is very aromatic, to put it politely. So people, again, it's come back into fashion, this plant, and several people, including restaurants, will gather the leaves, particularly if it's been cultivated, and harvest the leaves and put it into stews, into soups, and also into virgin olive oil. You put the leaves into the oil, you don't need to damage them or crush them, and then you have garlic, your own homegrown garlic olive oil, if you like. And of course it's increasing in popularity, and when you have drifts of it like this, I can actually get the perfume from it now without walking in there and crushing any leaves. I've actually got that on my hand. And it, whether you've been eating it or not, somehow it goes into your skin and you end up your breath smelling of garlic, although you haven't eaten any.
It'll keep the vampires at bay.
Oh, exactly, that's what we need. I don't know where rats disappeared off to, but it's happening so quickly. From your visit last week, I noticed the trees, the hedges have all suddenly come into leaf. It's the warm sort of late spring. I think once we're into May, we're almost allowed to call it summer now.
But it has been unseasonably warm and dry.
Yeah, this is the whole thing, and parts of the farm we've got a lot of work to do, but we just daren't put the seed in because we're sowing very small seeds. One of the other crucibles that we're sowing is mustard, and together with that, yet another one, it's called fodder radish. The seed is tiny, and it's got to be sown only 1 centimetre or 2 centimetres deep at the most, and otherwise it won't emerge. And because it's so dry, we daren't leave the seed there. The rooks, as I said on last week's podcast, think that I'm a very ultra-friendly farmer, and they'll have 100 acres of seeds to eat before the rains arrive. So we're watching the forecast as a hawk watches a mouse to see when rain's forecast so we can get going. But come on, we've got lots more to visit and to enjoy on this week's Countryside podcast. Here we go, back in the truck, and we'll go and see one of the lovely sights on the farm.
It's the Norfolk countryside at its very best on a summer's morning like this. Oh, we just pulled up in the pickup here on our way to another part of the farm, and look, 2 hares.
Wow.
They're sunbathing, aren't they?
Yes, they were. I think it's a Jack hare and a Jill, in other words, a male and female. And they're just lounging about, and all over that there's a 5-acre portion of fallow plot in the middle of a 30-acre field, and I think there's 4 or 5 pairs just on that portion of the field alone, and they're being much more sensible at the moment. Now we're in May, the madness of the March hares sort of left them behind, and they've just paired up and enjoying the sunshine and the early growth that's on the green. Another large white butterfly flying past us there, but such a lovely sight to see them. The count for this year is about 70 or just over 70 hares on the square mile, which is Hyash Farm. So a really good population, and they're all welcome. It's just part of that biodiversity that everybody's trying to achieve on their farms, whether you're farming intensively or in a more relaxed way. And when I say relaxed, because it's as hard work producing wildlife as it is a crop. So, but just lovely. They're just lounging away from us up the hill now. Rat's ears are pricked and he's watching them, but he stands no chance, and I don't think he'd even bother to try and chase them. He's tried it as a puppy, and of course they leave him way behind. Oh, they're just going up to the top of the hill there. Wow, what a lovely sight. You know, summer's here when you see that. Right, we're near our next destination. So we start the truck up again and just go round this hedge and then we'll be there.
How does the song go, Chris? One morning in May, how the rapture.
Wow.
And a rapturous sight in front of us.
Look at this, Matthew. This is one of the uncut hedges on High Ash Farm. Many of them are cut. Wait for it, there's 26 miles of hedgerow at the farm. And I leave this stretch, which is quite long, uncut. So it's a mixture of British native plants. There's dog rose, the hawthorn, blackthorn, holly mixed in there as well, field maple and oaks splattered in amongst it coming out of the top. And they were all hedgerow to about sort of 6 feet high. So there's 50 years of growth here now, so it's been uncut for 50 years and it's right on the edge of a field. It's not in anybody's way, and I leave it particularly for this display. Just behind us was the crabapple tree we visited 2 weeks ago, full blossom all gone. That's spring for you, moving on apace. And now we're in May and we're looking at May, which is the other name of this plant, which is the hawthorn. And it is absolutely magnificent. Just looks as though there's about to be a wedding and somebody's sort of done a huge flower display right to the top.
Lovely creamy white.
Yeah.
And it goes right up, doesn't it? 20 feet there.
Yes, and I can see bees. If we walk up a little bit closer, I can see actually bees working on the flowers. And more often than not, you'll see flies on it, which is a little bit unusual. It's an ancient hedging plant. I can actually hear an audible hum.
They're busy at their work there, and I suppose that's with the flowers here, that it's a very fresh source of nectar now, isn't it?
Yes, and that's hugely valuable. But I mentioned flies. Well, just look in front of us. You couldn't make this up. There are thousands of tiny little blooms. Really, really beautiful. 4, 5 petals on it. It's not a crucifer. So it is an ancient hedging plant. It was grown here by the Saxons as well. We've got a Saxon cemetery on the far side of the farm, and their name for it was hawthorn, or hedging plant, because they planted hedges to keep their livestock in. And we go right back to the time of the Black Death, the plague that struck London, because a lot of people died, and there were people out in the streets, sadly, unburied, pretty horrendous. And it's discovered that hawthorn, the perfume, isn't particularly pleasant. It's very reminiscent of death and decaying bodies. So when I mention flies on here, pollinating it, the scent actually attracts flies, and it's really meant to be unlucky to pick May and to bring it indoors because of that association with death. And the scent has actually been analysed by scientists, and it is very, very close to what a decaying corpse would produce. So that's why it's meant to be unlucky.
So it can stay out here on the hedge.
It can, because it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
so
a
little bit of the history
Yeah, I
of
mean,
it.
it's as lovely as any
Yes.
garden nursery would breed.
Oh yes, it's stunningly beautiful. This side, the next one along is about to come in. It's just in the shade of this one, and it's a good 20-25 feet tall, and just 2 or 3 more days on that and it will be exactly the same. and it is just alive with various species of insects, few bumblebees in there, lots of honeybees working on it. Just a stunning sight. So again, I'm going to have to do this phone call later today. Laura Cuffin, poor Laura, will have to come and photograph the garlic, perhaps the garlic mustard as well. But in particular, we'll see if we can get a shot of this in this evening's low sunshine. It's just breathtakingly beautiful, and nature kind of does all this for free. And when you work in with it, the reward that you get, the way it perhaps makes you feel, the way you regard the environment and the world we live in, it's really precious. All these different species that come into flower, that carry on their life cycle through the year. And this is just one stage. So the plant is attracting insects of various species to pollinate those flowers. The flowers then, once they're pollinated, start to produce tiny little green berries which ripen over the summer into next autumn, and that's when you have the haws on there, the little bright red fruit that looks like miniature bright red apples almost. They're tiny, the size of your little fingernail. And that's what attracts the thrushes, which come over and join our resident thrushes like blackbirds and the missel thrush, which will eat them. And our winter visiting thrushes, things like fieldfare and redwing, will come and plunder the berries. They then go off to roost, and when the berries, the little hard seeds inside them, English hawthorn, which this has one single seed in each berry. And Midland hawthorn, a very, very similar species, has 2 seeds in each berry, and those pass through the bird's alimentary canal. They can eat the nice soft digestive part around the outside of each berry, and then the seeds pass through unharmed, drop onto the floor wherever the bird is roosting at night perhaps, or when it flies off, and then that's how it gets itself about in the countryside. So it advertises the fact, come and eat me, and the deal is you can eat part of me, but my seeds need to pass through you. And some people gather the hawthorn, feed it to chickens. It passes through the guts of the chickens. Of course, birds don't have teeth, but they have grit in the gizzard, and it grinds up all the digestible part of the food, but the little pips, the little seeds inside are so hard they're unaffected, and they pass through. You collect the chicken manure, plant it out in a row in the garden, and you'll have literally thousands of young hawthorns, and that's how you can sort of farm them, if you like. But nevertheless, wood pigeon just cooing away. So this is left for our turtle doves. They can arrive here at the farm, and quite often they're so scarce now they will pass on, and occasionally in hot weather like this you'll hear that wonderful coo of the turtle dove. It's almost like a purr.
They love this hawthorn.
They love the hawthorn. It's dense like this. Look, you can almost throw a cricket ball at that.
It's dense all the way to the top.
Yes, it is. Yes, and that's exactly. And of course, it's not armed as fiercely as blackthorn, but nevertheless, if we just look at any older growth in here. I spoke before, it's armed all the way down with look at this fearsome little spine here, and although it's only young and green, it's almost ready to become needle sharp, that one.
There's one there.
Oh, there you are. Look at this. Look at that. That's fierce. Yeah. And that's why you're planted, to keep your livestock in there. Any cattle with very soft noses, they will graze off this, and the horses on the farm love the fresh growth on the hawthorn. So, fingers crossed, we might be able to get a video, because before you arrived this morning, almost at first light, right down the side of this field, wait for it, there was over 200 yellowhammers. I've counted 217 so far.
They're quite rare. Yellowhammers rare.
Well, they're very scarce now as a farmland bird, because farming practices are changed hugely, and I've got the camera just over that side facing into the field, and we hope we get some nice footage which will be on this podcast on High Ash Farm Facebook's page with the yellowhammers on there, combined with any pictures that Laura can take. But they're delightful. It's roughly 50-50 male and female yellowhammers. Again, red list species, but to have a flock like that, you might ask, what are they doing now in May? Well, this is a time of the year they flock up before they start breaking up. It always happens quite late. It surprises me when you think most birds are out busy nesting, and we've left all the margins around some of the fields here with tall tussocky grass. It's a ground nesting bird, and I'm absolutely delighted to have that number, and hopefully, fingers crossed, to prove the point with one of the videos from our trail cams at the farm. Delightful, very, very beautiful birds, also called the scribbling lark because of all the squiggles on the eggs. And it's got lots of, hundreds in fact, of local names right across the UK, just because it's a species that attracts people in a particular way, in the same way the cuckoo's call does with the cuckoo. Everybody kind of recognises it. It's one of the first bird songs you can memorise. And it's the same with the yellowhammer. It still carries on singing in hot weather, even into July. A little bit of bread and no cheese.
Wonderful, the yellowhammer, and May in all its glory, just for a few weeks,
yes.
But right now, what a sight.
Yes, that's how it gets its name. Comes into flower around the 1st of May.
Bit disappointed the yellowhammer aren't appearing for me, but
No, but they're here, I can promise you. But there's so much food on the ground for them. They're politely replete is the word, and they go and sunbathe in the hedges and come back this evening and have another feed.
on every episode of the podcast we love to receive your emails, and we've had one from Lewis Damaral, who lives in America. In fact, he specifies he's in Novato, Marin County, California. Lewis and his wife have lived there for a while, and they say, although our garden is small, we live at the edge of a small valley which includes a mix of lovely open space, hayfields, and a commuter train running through it. We're passionately in love with the semi-rural ecosystem we are privileged to be neighbours to. The valley is dry thanks to farmers' levees bordering and holding back the creek and the San Pablo Bay, the northern entrance to San Francisco Bay.
Wow.
In other words, we live in a floodplain. We grow fruit, vegetables and ornamental plants on land that was once at the edge of a marsh 100 years or so ago. Our challenge is making a go of our garden despite what appears to be soil-borne diseases, presumably fungi. Our ornamental plants seem to suffer the most. And in fact, Lewis has sent us some photographs of the reaction to what appears to be the spread of fungus under the bark of a Japanese maple tree. And there's the photograph, Chris. So what can be done?
Very little. When you have soil-borne fungi like that, it's not really possible to treat the soil itself. So the real answer is to choose varieties and species that aren't susceptible to different species of fungi. And I don't know which particular fungi that is. We have them here in the UK. There's one called the honey fungus, Armillaria malea, which can kill living oak trees even. It's very invasive. And so you try and grow something that's not attractive to that particular host species, if you like. So it is really difficult, but fungi are hugely important in the soil. There are millions and millions of them in every spadeful of soil that is here at the farm. So really difficult. So you've got to kind of go with nature and see what does thrive in the area and then copy that.
So from San Francisco sort of neck of the woods, should we travel the Atlantic in a few seconds and we'll head to Berlin?
Oh, goodness me.
Phoebe Passmore, welcome to Berlin, where you reach parts that other podcasts don't reach. A city full of demented dachshunds who have no natural predators. Rat would have a field day.
He certainly would, yes.
Berlin, also a city known for its mandarin ducks. Escaped or feral, I don't know. A week ago I saw about 50 of them flying. All males, a spectacular display. Is this a record? No, it's one of Chris's wonderful cassettes. Do you still make them?
No, I've stopped making sort of the old magnetic cassette tapes. We sold thousands of them, which helped to raise money for children in need years ago. But we do the podcasts, and when possible, we record the sounds that are pertinent to that particular week. So very difficult to go back in time with the old technology and move forwards, and we hope to be able to sort of bring more sounds on future podcasts. But lovely mandarin ducks, absolutely spectacular, one of the most ornamental waterfowl. We have them here at the farm. And so what happens at this time of the year, even where you are in Berlin, the females are all incubating any eggs. They're quite early nesters, and that leaves all the males with these flamboyant colours. They really are spectacular when you see them. It sort of makes your mouth drop wide open, and that's what's happened. So there we are. Explains the girls are all busy, the boys are left in their best attire, just waiting for next year to come now.
Lovely to hear from you, Phoebe, in Berlin, and to Lewis and to everyone else who sent notes, messages and questions and comments to High Ash Farm. And there is an address, of course, as far as emails are concerned. Just send them over, chris@highashfarm.com.
Matthew, a hare running down the hill towards us. Would you believe it? Less than 100 yards. It's
loping
along.
But quite fast.
Yes. Well, for a hare, that's slow. For us, it's top running speed. There, on its haunches, just listening, 4-inch long ears, just making out any sound. Perhaps going to one of the hedge bottoms where it's left a leveret. Could be a doe or a gill, which is a female hare, and she could be going to just feed her youngster that will be well secreted in the bottom of one of the hedges here. Lovely sight.
I think if there's one message from this week's podcast, get out and enjoy the spring, because it changes in just a few days.
Yes, it moves through really rapidly, and then we'll be into summer proper, and a whole different array of plants and flowers. Finishing off there with a wren.